Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Please post. Please let me know if you can hear me. Posting questions. Yep. Okay, great. Well, welcome to a very special episode of The Angry Astronaut, our latest streaming topic determined by our Patreon members. Thank you very much for showing up. This is about megastructures in the solar system and whether or not they're possible, which ones we might build first, or are we going to build any of them? But first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for the fact that we have achieved 10,000 subscribers. I started this channel less than 7 months ago, and yet here we are. And I am frankly overwhelmed. I never thought that something like this would be possible so fast. Just to put it into perspective, the average YouTube channel gets to 1,000 subscribers in 22 months. And I looked that up and I can't believe it. So all I can say is you guys are fantastic. The best subscribers in the universe. And thank you very much. So all of that having been said, we have another episode coming up today as well, since this particular topic won out by a very narrow margin over another topic, which doesn't come up much on my channel, and that's the topic of alien life and extraterrestrial civilizations. And as far as alien life is concerned, actually, this could have a massive impact on SpaceX and the Starship and Elon Musk's plans to colonize Mars. And that's something that I'm going to explain in this episode, along with some other aspects as to how we may have already detected alien life. Actually, in my opinion, I think that we have already detected alien life. I'm not talking about UFOs here, although I'm not saying that UFOs are an impossible thing, but nevertheless, it's something I don't get into. I'm talking about things that have been observed and recorded and can be quantified and put into a laboratory. So in any event, stay tuned for that because there's an awful lot of compelling things. But in the meantime, having said all of that, where's my 10K party hat? How about that? I suppose I should have had one, huh? How about that? So in any event, sorry. Trying to stay awake. So thank you very much for tuning in. Once again, if you wish to participate via asking questions or discussing that sort of thing, all of that is done through Discord. You can do that as a Patreon member for as little as $3 a month. In the description of this video, I describe how to do that. It can be done pretty quickly, and then you're only looking at 75 cents per Q&A because, we have 4 of these every month. I do it every Sunday, so it's a pretty low price to pay to be able to participate if this is something you really want to do. So that's entirely up to you, or, you can certainly watch as well because there's a lot of interesting questions. All right, let us get going with this particular topic. I already kind of got the ball rolling in a whole lot of debate and dispute and sometimes some anger, I think, on some of the comments when I talked about a Mars space elevator and the plausibility of that. And yeah, that's a topic that's up for a great deal of debate. Nevertheless, in my opinion, it's something that can be done with today's technology if we just put a little bit of effort into it. But we don't necessarily have to start on that. Nice audio confirmed. Good to hear. And as a matter of fact, sir, it was your efforts that made this possible because I bought this audio with your donation. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay. First question of the day. What do you think we could put together with the Starship? Do you think Space Force will make a space military station within the next 10 years? Well, just to be clear, Space Force is already making a military space station, just a very, very small one, and they're doing that with Sierra Nevada. Their little shooting star is actually being used as a mini space station, perhaps the precursor for something larger. They aren't revealing what they're using it for. They're being very, very hush hush about this. Sierra Nevada has a long history of contracts with the military, as a matter of fact. But given what the capabilities of that particular ship are, it's not just a transport pod. It has its own engines. It has its own solar panels. It's not just a satellite either. It's much more than that. So in any event, it can be anything from, observation and surveillance equipment all the way to some smaller space-based weaponry. Now, there are treaties against weapons of mass destruction, but smaller scale kinetic penetrators of some kind used to blow up bunkers from orbit, that sort of thing, made out of tungsten. That is something that could be deployed on this thing. So in any event, we're kind of already starting out with this. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not a big fan of going a whole lot bigger than that with Space Force, because where you start militarizing space, then you get counter moves on the part of our adversaries. And I'm not a huge fan of that, to be frank. If we start out militarizing space, if we make the first move, that is putting weapons into space, then others are going to counter, and then we have a space race with military being involved. And so far, space, aside from satellites and a few anti-sat weapons, has remained peaceful. And it'd be nice if it stayed that way. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, I think that it is entirely possible that they could, if they had to, set up a military space station. It really depends on who stays in office. I think that it's highly unlikely that Joe Biden would do something like that. I think that his beliefs on those sorts of matters are very different than Donald Trump's. But nevertheless, it all depends on how you feel about those sorts of things. Okay. All right. Let's keep it going. Yes, first military space station for a very, very long time, says DeSpaceBoy. Yes, that's true. So yeah, Sierra Nevada has the distinction of making the first military space station, small as it is. But this is not a mega project, so to speak, although I suppose it's a precursor to one, but one that's going up very, very soon, because the shooting star already exists. It's already been delivered, and it should be ready to launch by next year. So that's something that's going into action right away. What about a space station colony by the asteroid belt? Ultimately, the people who work there would have to live there. Very, very good point. If we build a space station by the asteroid belt, then we're probably looking at something called an O'Neill cylinder. At least that would be the most humane way of implementing such a thing. Something huge, and therefore something that's capable of generating its own gravity. And you need something big in order to be able to do that. If you don't have something that generates artificial gravity, then that means that you're going to be dealing with some pretty awful stuff. You're going to be dealing with long-term physical debilitations for these people in the asteroid belt, unless they just choose to stay out there for the rest of their lives. And even that, has questionable impacts on the human body. But nevertheless, where there is a lot of money, FTL, you're right. Russia did start a military space station a very long time ago. However, they discontinued it once a treaty was signed. They stopped space-based weaponry. quite some time ago. So in any event, as near as we can tell, they've adhered to this treaties, at least in terms of weapons of mass destruction, quite some time ago. So in any event, right now, their space-based weaponry capability seems to be pretty much restricted to anti-sat weapons. A point was made, remember, asteroids are very far apart from each other. Yes, indeed they are. And so exploiting the asteroid belt is going to be challenging. We're going to have to pick a particular asteroid that's incredibly rich in whatever we want, and then we're going to have to pick a C-class asteroid in order to convert into a way station, a fuel processing plant. And C-class stations have lots of carbon and water, which is capable of being made into rocket fuel. So in any event, that's one of the minimums I would think is 2 asteroids being required in order to be able to effectively exploit the asteroid belt. But certainly doable with the Starship, very doable. Okay, we have a question from Juhid. Blue Origin and their idea of a megacity. What type of megacity would they go with at the start? Would they just do it at Mars, or would they actually do a space one? Their plans seem to be a space one. And frankly, I have to say, this is where I have a bit of a problem with Blue Origin. Their stated objective is to export heavy industry into orbit, and yet all of the conceptual art that I've seen, and by the way, that includes the thumbnail that I have for this video, seems to be mostly residential, parks and trees and soil. I mean, things that would require an immense amount of work. What exactly is our objective here? Are we really moving heavy manufacturing in the dirty part of our planet off the surface? Or are we building a utopia for the very rich? I really don't know. I'm not too certain what the objectives actually are. There's a lot of money to be made in making a utopia for the very rich. But then again, there's a lot of money in manufacturing, in space also. I just would have preferred to see some of these conceptual art pieces of art to be of factories rather than massive parks and beautiful idyllic places. But maybe that just makes it less marketable. I really don't know. Okay, what about a Shkadov thruster to move the solar system out of harm's way using the sun as an engine, stellar engines? To Spaceboy, thank you for that question. That is something way in the future. We're talking about something that uses the sun's energy and gravity to move an entire star system, and because the sun's gravity would essentially pull its planets with it. Yeah, that is something that an incredibly advanced civilization would pull off, and something that is way, way far in the future for us as a map. However, in my opinion, I think that we've seen a relatively recent example of something that might have been like this. A red giant that just went hurtling across the cosmos at a very high rate of speed that we observed, that was said to have been started by some sort of mysterious supernova that we have never seen before. But what if it was a dangerous star to some highly advanced extraterrestrial civilization, and they wanted to move it away before it exploded, so that there would be no gamma ray burst to destroy their civilization? These are sorts of things that are, in my opinion, techno-signatures that we just tend to ignore because they seem too fantastic to us, even though they're possible, at least possible in terms of, the laws of physics. There's nothing that would prevent it from being done. So in any event, but that's long, long in the future. Sorry, I tend to get dry. FTL, thoughts on basalt fiber production on the moon to provide material for geostationary orbit or low Earth orbit large rotating HABs. Any thought of what moon-based materials could be used for a matrix or resin? Well, there's a lot on the moon. The moon has pretty much everything that we have here. Certainly I mean, carbon is not incredibly common there, but nevertheless usable. But the moon, especially the dark side or the far side, depending on what you want to call it, has fundamentally different types of materials, especially at the South Pole, where we've detected a very large magnetic field, which might be caused by large concentrations of various heavy metals down there, which is something that the Chinese might be interested in, by the way, and one of the reasons why they sent their rover down there. Hard to say for sure, but in any event, there's a lot of raw materials on the moon. Basalt fiber, though, yeah, that's possible, and therefore manufacturing, when you're talking about fiber, you're also talking about lunar space elevators, which are probably the most feasible form of space elevator that I can think of. With the low gravity and the zero atmosphere involved with the moon, and its tidally locked nature. As long as you put the top of the elevator at Lagrange point 1, where the gravitational forces of both the Earth and the moon cancel each other out, it makes it very, very possible, and makes going to the moon a much, much easier task, and establishing a large presence on the moon, and also lunar mining, all kinds of practical uses for a lunar space elevator. Okay, I've advocated for a mass driver on the moon, says Cully. How do we prevent the malicious use of it? Well, that's a hard one, isn't it? One way is to keep a close eye on it and the energy levels being used. If nuclear reactors are being built that have much higher energy output than they need to, then we know for sure what it's being used for. So I would say keeping a close eye on whatever is being built and having the capability to destroy it if we have to is something that needs to be kept in mind. Now, I do believe that anybody who wanted to build a mass driver and then decided to weaponize it might be a little hesitant to do so if they knew that they were being watched every minute of every day. And by the way, that makes me a big advocate of the Lunar Gateway, because the Lunar Gateway, because of its orbit, comes very close to the North Pole of the moon, and then can release small craft, robots, etc., which would come in at low altitude from the North Pole to the South Pole underneath any radar cover or anything else, could approach a base on the South Pole undetected and then keep it under observation. So there are big reasons why Artemis needs to go through, in my opinion, and the Lunar Gateway in order to keep this stuff under observation. So in any event, production could be easily under the I'm sorry, FTL, I didn't quite understand your response. Production could be easily under the natural park inner skin. Ah, yes, of course, in terms of the blue origin. Yeah, that's possible. Maybe it's down in the depths of what they're doing. Still would have preferred to have actually seen it, just as a way for them to convey what they're trying to achieve in art. I think that would be a really nice thing to see. But yes, you're right. Production could be maintained beneath the surface of an O'Neill cylinder. Question, does it make sense to you to crash Phobos into Mars to clear its orbit and do a bit of terraforming? I don't know. I think Phobos can also be used for a variety of different purposes, mining it, also for a tourist destination. As a matter of fact, you see up here my little tourist poster, which is probably reversed to you guys. Sorry about that. But in any event, yeah, that's That's a loaded question, but yeah, it would do some terraforming, that's for sure. It would cause a massive explosion to crash Phobos into Mars, even though it's eventually going to do that anyway. And of course, another reason to crash Phobos into Mars is to get it out of the way of a Martian space elevator. Although there have been proposals to make a Martian space elevator with Phobos as the counterweight, and there are ways to do that as well. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed question, to be honest. And we can't without fully understanding the nature of Martian geology. That could also be dangerous if we don't fully understand the nature of Martian volcanism, for example, and whether or not that planet is truly dead from a volcanic standpoint. It probably isn't, given that we detected all of that magma, or at least we think we've detected magma underneath the North Pole. Kind of hard to say what crashing a massive moon into the surface might do. So I've got mixed feelings. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not like strictly opposed to it. But I think that it does, something that would warrant a lot of study before we went for something like that. On fiber production, says FTL, does continuous fiber production set up on the moon then reeled up into orbit for easy deployment and fabrication? Yes, I do believe that, FTL, in terms of fiber production. There's every bit of reason to believe from all of the experiments that we've done thus far that carbon fibers and various types of ultra strong, very thin fibers manufactured either in microgravity or very low gravity is a lot easier. And we've, even just with brief experiments on aircraft, diving for just a few seconds, they've been able to produce carbon fibers a whole lot easier. So yeah, I would say that could become one of the moon's biggest industries, is the manufacture of fibers of various kinds. Also, do pure carbon fibers, are they really needed for lunar space elevators? I don't know. I question that. We've already manufactured carbon fiber alloys that are meters long. And with no atmosphere, with a low gravity, that sort of thing, do you really need pure carbon fibers in order to make a lunar space elevator? I would say probably not. I think you could get by with something else. So hard to say, hard to say. Cully, the moon is made up of moon bases. Well, yes, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope that that's what ends up happening. FTL sees a lunar-based reel-to-orbiting reel fiber production delivery system today with no exotic methods or tech required. Indeed, solar focusing mirrors could provide the heat necessary. That sounds like, and then a picture is provided of Apple's new headquarters. Very interesting. Very interesting. I may do a video on that, as a matter of fact. By the way, we have 170 people tuned in right now. Thank you. Thank you very much, audience, for tuning in. Really appreciate this interesting conversation already. FTL, I tend to agree with you. I think manufacturing various types of really useful fibers on the lunar surface could be a massive industry, a lucrative industry, and used to produce a whole variety of things besides just space elevators. So in any event, so yes, we have a comment from Jet Morgan. Keeping an eye on potential abuse of a mass driver tech means watching everything that the CCP or the PRC, depending on what you want to call China, the People's Republic of China, does on the moon. That's true. I'd say that as much as I hope that China has peaceful intentions on the moon, and as much as I would like to think, based on our experience with taikonauts, our NASA astronauts' experience with them, and the fact that they've proven to be of a very similar mindset to our own astronauts and to cosmonauts, maybe, they'll stick to a more peaceful objective. But at the same time, yes, I do believe that since they're a branch of the Chinese military, they do bear watching. because a lunar mass driver could give them a massive strategic advantage, or at least achieve strategic parity with the United States, which the Chinese desperately want in order to maintain control of the South China Sea, which they are very aggressively pushing towards right now. Taiwan and everything else in the South China Sea. As a matter of fact, they're using the current crisis in the United States to expand their presence and influence in the South China Sea to a great degree. Going so far, actually, as to launch a huge cyber attack against Australia when Australia complained about it. I would say, unfortunately, as much as it saddens me, I do think that we need to keep the People's Republic of China and their activities on the moon under observation, and everything that they do there. Grudgingly agreed upon combined space police force, wherein the China, the US, the Russians, and the European Union all grudgingly play well together, and simply to ensure that there's no asymmetric downwell events. And by, thank you for that term, asymmetric downwell events are, in other words, launching small asteroids, artificial asteroids, using a mass driver from the moon to the Earth and blowing the hell out of whatever target you want to. Extremely dangerous, extremely potent weapon, and one that would be very, very difficult. I can't believe it. I went and completely forgot to mute my phone. Sorry about that, but I get very few calls, so that shouldn't have much of a disturbance, and I don't want to break up the conversation as I monkey around with my phone. I would say that some sort of police force, multinational police force, would be a good idea. And if somebody doesn't play nice, then something needs to be done. But yeah, multinational police force as opposed to a unilateral police force, i.e. just the United States, I'm against that. I really don't think that the United States needs to be the world's police force or the solar system's police force. I really don't. This is something that we all need to work together on. Tom, thank you for showing up. First step should be focused on making our trips to and from the moon as easy as possible for moon exploitation. I think that that's a really good idea. Moon first, then Mars is the most practical approach. Now, this does not seem to be what Elon has in mind. Elon is very determined to go straight to Mars in 2022 if he can. If the Starship's capable of doing it, he's going to go for it. So in any event, more power to him. But this has been his stated objective and remains his stated objective. So in any event, I do tend to agree. I think that we would learn a lot from colonizing the moon and some of the experiences that we would have there before we go to Mars. And it'd be a lot easier to do, and the moon is only 3 days away as opposed to Mars, which is a minimum of 6 months, and that's if the planets are properly aligned. Okay, basalt fiber. Oh, FTL wants to be 100% clear, and I'll concur with him on this. That basalt fiber versus carbon fiber, basalt fiber is nearly as strong, and so as a result, for space elevators, again, very plausible. And even on Mars, keep in mind, Martian atmosphere, less than 1% of our atmosphere. And also lower gravity, slower rotation, that sort of thing. That could definitely be a huge industry for that. What do you think the trade routes would look like? Says ZZ Top. Boy, that's a loaded question. It depends on where we establish first. I would say that trade routes, Mars to asteroid belt, if we can establish ourselves on Mars fairly early on, Mars can exploit the asteroid belt far easier than Earth can because of the gravity, not because of distance, but just because of gravity. You can send expeditions to Mars with far less propellant and start mining the asteroid belt. And by the way, I do believe that that's why A Falcon Heavy is sending that probe to 16 Psyche in the asteroid belt, which is loaded with valuable raw materials, including some very expensive stuff. So in any event, it could be the prize of the solar system, depending on how you look at it. So that would be part of it. Maybe Mars to asteroid belts, and then from Mars to the moon and to Earth. I would say moon to Earth would be a logical trade route, and perhaps moon to Mars too, if you can manufacture. If they come up with really good types of basaltic or carbon fibers there first. Because Mars, once again, if Mars has a space elevator, a functional space elevator, then there's going to be a whole lot of benefits to that. No dangerous landings, transportation of large amounts of good from orbit down to the surface. You don't need heat panels on the Starship. You can have a stripped down Starship just like the Lunar one, except no landing gear. So in any event, Okay, another space nut brought up, and I'll go ahead and say again, if you wish to participate in this, it is done on the Discord server. Just go to the description. You can sign up for Patreon and Discord quite easily. I have directions on how to do that if you want to participate and ask questions. So that was brought up by one of a member of my staff, another space nut, an invaluable part of this team. So and even thank you for that. So just thought I'd mention that. Okay, FTL again. He's definitely, as he said, he's got basalt fiber on the brain, stronger than glass and steel. No special processes or materials like carbon fiber. How about that? Yeah. I would say that that's definitely something to look at, and something, once again, that we could construct lunar space elevators. That would be our first step to make that a possibility. And then from there, we go to Martian space elevators. These are huge projects, but nevertheless, well worth it, and within the boundaries of today's science, as opposed to earthbound space elevators, which have tons of problems, lots of problems. So in any event, also transparent aluminum was brought up as another possibility for a material used. And once again, I keep talking about space elevators like I've got these on the brain. We could also do something called a skyhook. That's talked about a fair amount, which basically, instead of going all the way to the ground, it instead dangles a platform or a net or something along those lines to where you can launch something just to suborbital space, which requires a lot less effort and a lot less propellant, and then use the momentum of the skyhook to carry the object into orbit. So in any event, well, FTL about the People's Republic of China. All I can say is that I continue to hold out hope. Maybe I am pretending, but I continue to hold out hope because the alternative is war. Ultimately, it's just like the situation with Japan in the Second World War. They continued to push until eventually war became inevitable, and the cost was unbelievable. So much bloodshed, and so much destruction, not just to the Japanese and America, but to the Filipinos and everybody else who was unfortunate enough to be in the way. So I certainly hope that the People's Republic of China is not hell-bent on military confrontation, because if they are, it's going to be an incredibly, incredibly bloody war, where a draft may be implemented again here in the United States, and my son may be forced to go off and fight. Something that I'm not looking forward to. So I certainly hope that their intention is not military, or that they intend on breaking space treaties and force military confrontation. I certainly hope not. Okay. What planets are best for terraforming besides Mars? Well, Mars is a challenge to begin with. Titan is another possibility, although it's incredibly remote, and also very cold. But nevertheless, Titan is another possibility. Venus is also doable, but still, that's a lot of atmosphere. That's a lot of heat. That's a lot of sulfuric acid. Yeah, yeah, something that would be quite an endeavor. I would say Mars is probably our easiest task, at least in terms of distance. Titan certainly doable, but again, lots of issues with that. And Mars also very difficult too. I mean, that's if you want to talk about a mega project, that certainly is. Has to be done stage by stage by stage. We're talking about lichens that may be able to survive the Martian surface that would start to produce more oxygen. You need nitrogen as well. You need a lot in order to produce an artificial atmosphere. And then you need to continue to produce that atmosphere because Mars does not have a magnetic field. And so the solar wind will start stripping that atmosphere away. So nevertheless, okay. Okay, well, thanks. There's a comment made about the microphone. Well, thank you very much for that. Okay, talk about more about the current structural tech we can look to in the near term used to build a Earth-Luna area infrastructure. Well, I think you've talked about that to a degree. Basaltic fiber being used for a space elevator going all the way actually to an Earth Lagrange point. That's huge. That's thousands and thousands of kilometers, but nevertheless, very doable. It's been talked about. And if we're talking about mega projects, that's one. So then all you have to do is get something into a little higher than low Earth orbit. I don't think you want something in the area where it's going to have to be constantly dodging satellites and space debris. But nevertheless, you can make it to where all you have to do is get something, maybe to geosynchronous orbit, and then transport it from there, which is a lot easier than sending something all the way to the moon at the price of $1 billion per SLS, for example. That's in the long term, that's a much, much more efficient way of establishing a presence on the moon. Although we can probably get, of course, we can get the Starship to a lunar space elevator once we're finished with the lunar Starship and start delivering lots of cargo to Lagrange Point 1 and start lowering lots of cargo from there too. So it really depends on, of course, then again, if you're able to get the Starship up to a point without refueling it, it makes it a lot easier, whereas getting it to the moon requires refueling. So in any event, I would say basaltic fibers that you've talked about, carbon fibers, once we've gotten further with those, et cetera, can make a Earth-Luna infrastructure a whole lot easier. And something that we definitely need to be considering and working a lot more aggressively on than spending billions and billions of dollars on conventional chemical rockets to go to the moon. I mean, maybe to get us to the moon the first few times, but after that, we just need to abandon this because chemical rockets, I mean, we were just talking about the Chinese. The Chinese had that concept figured out back in the Middle Ages. It's time for us to move on and stop using this stuff. Just my opinion in any event. We certainly have many types of technologies. I'm starting to fall behind here. So cycler ships or space stations, something that you'd like to see between Earth Moon or Earth Mars. Marked, I do apologize. I'm going to have to claim ignorance, at least in terms of the term that you just used. If you could clarify that, please, and I'm going to try to catch up here. FTL, I'll get back to your question because we just have something, Eugenius moons, not planets, like Saturn and Jupiter's moons. That was a response to the terraforming. Yes, I tend to agree. Moons, Titan being a good one, just because Titan already has an atmosphere, that sort of thing. Okay, Crew Dragon, perfect escape pod for space stations. I tend to agree. However, if you look at the Gateway space station, they are actually planning on using the Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser for escape pods, which is the reason that has certain advantages is because you can land it on airfields all across the planet. So if you have to evacuate a whole lot of people real fast, then you don't have to worry about recovering all of those escape pods from the ocean. Whereas with the Dream Chaser, that can set down on a lot of different airfields as long as the FAA clears the airspace. So that does make that a pretty practical use for the Dream Chaser. Once again, not to be talking up Sierra Nevada versus SpaceX, because I like them both a lot. But nevertheless, I think competition between the two of them is a good thing, because it encourages SpaceX to keep pushing and to keep developing, so that they stay ahead. Because in some ways, with some of these applications, they could fall behind. So, competition is something that is always good for the market. I'm a big believer in capitalism, and I'm a big believer in competition. So in any event, okay. Near-term methods or tech launched using Elon's Starship. Boy, there's so much. I'll talk about one, FTL, real quick, and that would be what's called a Dyson dot. In other words, solar panels in orbit, used to collect energy and provide energy for the Earth. This has been talked about extensively, and there have been already designs put forward for large space-based solar collectors. I did a video on this that powers, 4 of them would power the entire city of New York, and they're only about the size of a football field, each one of them. So, and they could be deployed by the Starship. If we had enough Starships, we could deploy them in the space of a few days. And that's if we had 1,000 Starships, of course, but even 100 Starships could deploy something like this within the space of a month or less. So in my opinion, I think taking care of the Earth's energy needs would be a near-term thing that we should definitely be looking at. And space-based solar is way better than Earth-based solar, by a factor of about 40, I believe. The Spaceboy just said we should use Phobos as a skyhook. That has been proposed, and I think that that's a good idea. Because Phobos orbits Mars faster than Mars rotates, using it as a conventional space elevator is not really doable, but you can put a platform in the upper levels of the Martian atmosphere and use it as a skyhook. So yeah, that's a very practical use for Phobos. And of course, Phobos would be a counterweight that could handle just about any level of cargo. Okay. FTL cleared up. CCP versus PRC. Chinese Communist Party versus the People's Republic of China, making the distinction between the Chinese people and the Chinese government. Good point. Very good point. Yeah, Chinese would probably disagree with you because they would say the People's Republic of China is the party, but of course that's how they look at it. But nevertheless, you make a very good point there. Next week on the 30th, Perseverance launch. Thank you for that. It's a little off topic. And yes, ZZ Top, thank you. We do need to get back to China, even though we've been talking about China in terms of mega projects because of the whole mass driver thing, and the fact that I did a video about the Chinese constructing a mass driver for military purposes on the south pole of the moon. We should get off that topic because it is highly charged politically. Okay, could you feasibly use a moon mass driver to give a delta V boost to human-rated craft? Yeah, the issues would start with G-force Cully. That's sudden acceleration, even on the moon. That's a lot of G's. Maybe, but it would have to be a very, very long track because it has to be a gradual buildup of speed. Otherwise, you're going to kill the passengers. It's a lot better for cargo than it is for people, to be frank. But I might be a lot more comfortable with a lunar space elevator than I would be with a mass driver with people. But still, you build it long enough at the right angle, and then yeah, you could do that. A lot easier than you could do it on Earth. On Earth, it would have to be something the height of Mount Everest or something along those lines. Okay. Could the erratic orbit of Phobos be harvested to generate energy necessary to heat it or move it? Boy, that's an interesting question. I would say only until it starts hitting the atmosphere or something along those lines. Maybe the centrifugal force of Phobos, but I don't know. I like Phobos. What can I say? It's a unique moon. Orbits so close to Mars, it hurtles across the sky. Honestly, I think that that's going to be a huge tourist destination. You sit on the surface and watch Mars just go by underneath you. I think that would just be an amazing thing to see. I don't know. I guess I'm a little biased, but I like Phobos. It's been there for a long time. It's not going to crash into Mars for millions of years. I don't know about bringing it down, but then again, there are advantages to it. Yes, terraforming Venus is a Dyson sphere around Mars's atmosphere, says Tom. Wow, that's an interesting concept. That is a mega project and a half. But yeah, that'd be a lot easier than a Dyson sphere around the sun. And of course, there's an enormous amount of solar energy that you would be able to pick up. Plus, you could create whatever atmosphere you wanted there. I suppose that's true, and also they wouldn't the solar wind wouldn't strip it away. Instead, solar power would continue to would instead provide Mars with almost unlimited energy. So Johnny Spacer, boy, I haven't, this is your first comment, I believe, on here. Well, maybe, I'm not sure, but terraforming Mars would be futile. Well, so the argument goes. And yeah, there's a lot of arguments to suggest that there isn't enough carbon dioxide in the Martian soil or on the surface or enough water to produce the sufficient atmosphere. Now, there is some question as to whether or not all the perchlorates on the Martian surface, if we could unleash some kind of enzymes to process the perchlorates into oxygen, that could be a start. But still, that would be a massive undertaking, to say the least. So you may very well be right, Johnny Spacer. Cully, do you think we could genetically engineer microbiota? Boy, I just talked about that, didn't I? Yes, I do think we can. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, there's already something there doing that. We have discovered, we don't have to genetically engineer it, by the way. There are microorganisms on Earth today that can gobble up the perchlorates and produce oxygen as a byproduct. They exist right now. And because we have found more oxygen in the Martian atmosphere than we expected, what does that tell you? To me, that tells me that there's something already in the Martian soil doing this. And all we need to do is just give it a helping hand, and it can produce a lot more oxygen for us. So that's just my opinion, but in any event. O'Neill, Johnny Spacer, O'Neill cylinders would be our best bet for Earth-like environments. You're right, because it can generate a full G of artificial gravity, whereas Mars cannot. So yeah, O'Neill cylinders are a massive mega project, but that's what we're talking about. O'Neill cylinders have to be colossal. I would say that you need to harvest the raw materials from the moon or Mars or from the asteroid belt or something like that. From Earth, it would take a tremendous amount of effort in order to bring up the necessary materials to build O'Neill cylinders. Once again, O'Neill cylinders are these giant, huge cylinders that rotate, generating a full G of artificial gravity because they're so massive, and they can have their own environments, their own weather, that sort of thing. It's quite a concept. O'Neill cylinders in Earth orbit bother me, though, to be frank, because unless they have really good defenses, they can get blasted by a thermonuclear attack. They don't ensure our long-term survival as a species, at least in low Earth orbit. There would be many, many ways to destroy such a cylinder with a nuclear strike from Earth, unless it had a really good missile defense system. So in any event, it's if you're going to build an O'Neill cylinder, I would say build it someplace a long ways away from here if you want to ensure the long-term survival of the species. Mars atmosphere upkeep would be expensive after getting one up. You're right. However, if we terraform Mars, that's going to be a heck of an endeavor anyway. We're talking many centuries at least. Who knows what our technology is going to be? The Dream Chaser to lunar orbit. That is a possibility, but I don't see it being practical, because the Dream Chaser is, of course, obviously being something designed for an atmosphere, is I think much better as a ship used in low Earth orbit. That sort of thing. I think that now, of course, the shooting star is a different subject. The shooting star actually is capable of resupplying the lunar gateway. So that particular, and as a matter of fact, they bid on that and lost to SpaceX, although NASA may decide to involve them later on, depending on how successful the shooting star is. Johnny Spacer, thank you for all these contributions. We should send in situ lunar resource recovery experiments to the moon ASAP to kickstart off Earth mega projects. I agree completely. The moon is a much easier place to start these mega projects, much easier place to manufacture all kinds of things. So we should be, looking aggressively towards exploiting the moon. And the fact that we've spent half a century not doing this really pisses me off. It really annoys me. It's just been a complete waste, but I don't need to start ranting on that. Okay. Huh. Okay, that was an interesting. FTL just uploaded some sort of fiber reel for a missile. So in any event, that's an interesting thing being launched from what looks to be some sort of APC. I'd be interested to hear more about it. A Space Olympics, says ZZ Top. Hell yeah. I love that idea, especially on Mars with 1/3 gravity. All kinds of cool things you could do there, extreme sports that you can't do here. And with the development of the new biosuit that MIT was working on for a while, athletes could, carry out competitive sports with no atmosphere. In relative safety, because the biosuit is fairly easy to repair if you were to rip it. So in any event, if we can perfect that, then Space Olympics without even, in the Martian environment, which would be dangerous and extreme, and I think would draw huge crowds, or at least huge numbers of viewers. That could be something neat. But of course, also you could do it indoors on Mars, 1/3 gravity, and still have some amazing things. And this would also serve, of course, to help our nations come together as the traditional Olympics have done in the past. Okay, Mark just said cycler ships thank you for clarifying this, being a craft on orbit that continues cycling between two bodies in the solar system. Craft doing a flyby to Earth to Mars in a repeated pattern. Yes, this is a very cool idea. And I would say that it's something that should definitely be explored. I would say the Lunar Starship or something like it is something that could do this. Something that never lands, but can carry a lot of cargo and goes to and from all the time. And then you transport passengers or cargo up from the surface of Mars, either with a space elevator or with a skyhook or something else, or just with conventional rockets for that matter. Rendezvous with the Lunar Starship, have it bring it back to Earth, and then use more conventional means to send the cargo down. Yeah, or just have a conventional starship do it. Yeah, I would say, and then you add the more of these ships you have, the more you can continue providing materials. Of course, the drawback to this is the fact that Earth and Mars are not always in conjunction or not always in perfect opposition. And so, if you're talking about human passengers, that's a real problem. But cargo, yeah, definitely, because you don't care how long cargo takes. But yeah, with people, you pretty much have to wait until either opposition using Venus as a slingshot, as I described in one video, or the opposition approach every 2 years. I'm not sure if the Dream Chaser's heat shield can handle the faster entry speeds returning from the moon. Says Johnny Spacer. Yes, I tend to agree. I don't think that the Dream Chaser is really designed for lunar applications. I think it's kind of a low Earth orbit ship. However, it's a very competitive one. And I already brought that up in my last video, so I'm not going to get into that right now. Potential use is a habitat for astronauts on the way to a planet. So they just have to dock with a cycler and a lander, hop on to live, hop off to land. Yes, I suppose one thing is of course, radiation and cosmic ray protection. We have to be sure that we have that mastered. The longer the transition, the more this problem comes up. The longer any journey, the more you're exposed to some of the most intense radiation and cosmic rays in the cosmos. So in any event, definitely something that we need to look at. Satellite power system, yes, sats in orbit. I think if I understand this correctly, yes, that's true with PV tech in the 1970s. You're right, FTL. Once again, it pisses me off. It really does. We knew that this kind of technology and putting solar panels into orbit to provide power was available almost half a century ago. We've been familiar with this for a long time. The Starship, of course, makes it a lot more doable because it can carry huge amounts of cargo. But still consider if we had been doing this the whole time, if for the last half century we've been using heavy lift vehicles to put up solar panels again and again and again and again. Think of all of Earth's power needs we could have taken care of by now if we had really endeavored into that field for the last half century. We would have had a lot taken care of by now. And once again, it really pisses me off. Harvest Phobos erratica to boost or stabilize its orbit. Yes, that's possible. If we mine it and then give it a little push to keep it from being such a hazard, yeah, that would certainly be a possibility. The Gateway Foundation, question from Batrams. What do you think of the likelihood of their spaceport being built? Do you think Sierra Nevada would be able to help build it and or access it? Well, considering that Gateway is interested in Sierra Nevada being a part of this, and that they have a lot of money potentially to make out of it, then yeah, I would say that there's a significant possibility. Although this is a huge space station we're talking about here. far larger than anything that we've done in the past. But it is a mega project, and that's what we're talking about. The Gateway Foundation, for those of you unfamiliar with it, is a large orbiting station, not an O'Neill cylinder, but something that uses individual pods. Each pod bought by a different investor for different purposes, for hotels, for experiments, for a variety of different things. So that's been their idea from the start. And so far, I'm not sure about their progress as far as investors are concerned. But Sierra Nevada would be a huge first investor. And the fact that they're talking to them about this, I think, means a lot. If they are indeed talking to them, but let's hope that they are, because that would be something that would be incredibly cool and very game changing. Okay. O'Neill cylinders, says FTL, are nothing but a giant collection spool for lunar basalt fiber production. Yes, FTL can't stop talking about it. The more fiber rolled up or constructed, the more momentum can be used to power the reel, and solar could provide more momentum. Yes, that's true. In the Troy Rising series, John Ringo creates a space fortress out of 16 Psyche using lots of solar mirror to melt it and spin it. It becomes a squat sphere with a hollow center. Wow, that would be a huge endeavor, wouldn't it? I don't know. There would have to be a lot of other people not interested in exploiting 16 Psyche in order to be able to do that, to build that space fortress. If everybody else ignores the obvious benefits of 16 Psyche, then somebody should exploit it, and everybody else pays the price for not. But that's a very interesting concept, and I have actually, and I may be spouting blasphemy, but I have never read Troy Rising, so that's something that I definitely should do. Winnebago paint job on a starship. Okay. Will it be a priority, says Cully, to simulate a natural park for animals and plants that doesn't include humans? That we should create an off-world backup of nature besides what humans enjoy? That's a very interesting question. That isn't what the stated objective of Blue Origin is. It's the other way around, which is to make Earth a park, and the O'Neill cylinders, or space, the place where we do all of the polluting, where it's not going to be any problem. But yeah, and of course, we're talking about silent running here. At least I assume that's what's inspiring your question. That old movie Silent Running, where Earth, animals, and environment was preserved in space after we completely destroyed it on Earth. A very, very grim future, to say the least, but a mega project that may become necessary if we end up destroying everything else on this planet. Which would be pretty disastrous in a lot of ways. Okay, if the USA created a global solar array and gave power to the world for free, do you think other countries or people would be grateful or entitled bidder? Boy, that's an interesting question. FTL, I would say that since, and by the way, a lot of you people may not know this, and I know I'm touching on a really hot button topic here when we're talking about global warming, but Elon Musk supports the carbon tax. He supports that notion that countries that have contributed to the buildup of pollutants in our atmosphere should help other nations develop technologies that so that they won't go through their own industrial revolutions. He has stated his support for this concept. So that would be a great way to pay the carbon tax, wouldn't it? Is just to give them the energy. It really depends, I suppose, on how much our own energy needs are being taken care of. I don't know how much of it would be entitlement, but nevertheless, we're talking about everybody's well-being here in the future, by taking care of the Earth's energy needs by not using 19th century technology. So yeah, I would say that Oh, Karif just made a comment here. Very good book. Well, I'm going to have to read it then, definitely. I'm sorry, I research so much science fact that apart from the expanse, science fiction gets kind of tough for me sometimes, but nevertheless. Yes, Cully. Silent Running is a very old 1970s movie with really lousy special effects, at least by today's standards, and really terrible tree hugger music. But nevertheless, it is a really cool movie, and I highly suggest it. And as a matter of fact, for those of you interested in the old Battlestar Galactica, the classic Battlestar Galactica, Dirk Benedict is in that movie. So, okay, let's see. All right, what was that movie with the little robots, Huey, Dewey, and Louie? That was Silent Running. Yeah, he had three buddy robots. After well, I'm not gonna give away spoilers, but he did have three robots. Carbon tax to pay for industrialized nations' past sins makes no sense. Now, that's not what Elon says. So those countries have created the knowledge necessary to avoid repeating the damaging parts of it. That's true, but nevertheless, given, of course, China and India, for the most part, are doing a lot to try to modernize in accordance with the peace accords, but their requirements were a lot lower than ours, well, we dropped out of it, but Europe's, because of because of this. It's a lot cheaper to manufacture a car than it is to manufacture solar panels. So, as Africa industrializes and everybody gets a car there and we start polluting the heck out of our planet, I don't know about ethics at that point. I'm starting to think about practicality. But in any event, that's my own purpose. Yes, FTL says Elon is wrong. And you know something? People don't say that very much, but on that particular issue, it comes up. But yeah, he's definitely a believer in global warming. As a matter of fact, he said, quote, it is the second most or second greatest threat. Actually, I'm paraphrasing him here. Second greatest threat to human civilization next to artificial intelligence. That is his belief. Okay, so let's not get into this. We need to stop, please. If we can stop on the global warming thing, it is such a charged issue, and let's put it aside because I don't want to get into this right now because that can create who knows what. So in any event, but that is, in terms of the Dyson dots, I think that's something that can create some amazing stuff. Yes, Space Fortress was brought up, Seeker of Knowledge, at least the 16 Psyche thing. But yeah, asteroids being manufactured into something for security purposes. Okay. So let's see here. Okay. And I think it's because I'm behind that I'm encountering these. I'm kind of bypassing the stuff about global warming and any of the politics associated with it. Let's get back to Dyson dots in terms of more of what those look like. Well, Dyson dots are not just things that provide solar power. Oh God, I'm getting back to global warming. They also provide a shade of sorts for the Earth in order for us to be able to control our climate. So in any event, an artificial way for us to reduce temperatures without having to go through all these extensive processes of reducing carbon emissions. So in any event, that is another purpose to Dyson dots. Okay. All right, how about the assembly of interstellar probes around Jupiter orbit? Well, I would say, Jupiter orbit is a long ways away, obviously. I'm not sure what we would use for raw materials there. I don't know a lot about what kind of heavy metals exist in Jupiter. I would say interstellar probes maybe around the asteroid belt and then using Jupiter as a slingshot perhaps, or something along those lines might be better. I really don't know. But in any event, interstellar probes are definitely something, a mega project for the future. I think that the long shot project, where we're talking about shooting all those solar sails out to Proxima Centauri, that one's pretty cool. Although I think space lasers would be far more efficient than building these massive laser arrays on Earth. You get a lot more power and a lot more efficiency if you don't have to shoot through all that atmosphere. But in any event, if you're going to build all those stinking probes, you may as well build the lasers out in space. So space prisons, boy, that's a tough one. We're gonna need them. People are going to commit crimes on Mars. They're gonna commit crimes everywhere. I would prefer a prison where somebody can put their effort to work, put their crimes, to work for the colony in general and for the good of the colony, rather than just locking them up and consuming energy and supplies. So in any event, that would be my preference, is kind of a space chain gang, if you want to call it that. But nevertheless, where people go to work to contribute and give back to the society that they committed their crime against. Okay, large asteroids hollowed out for interstellar spacecraft and generation ships. I actually made another video about this, and yes, that is one of the most feasible ways for us to create a generation ship and interstellar probes. A link just came up which wiped out some stuff, but nevertheless, there are links on here that get put together into a single stream, or rather a single link at the end by another space nut who always contributes to this. Thank you so much for that. So in any event, but yeah, generation ships with hollowed out asteroids. It depends, of course, can humans handle the concept of generation ships? But then again, if you're talking about the long-term survival of the species, that's one of the best ways to do it. And you only need a couple hundred people in order to do that, in order to provide the necessary diversity, genetic diversity, in order to provide a viable colony, a viable human community in a different stellar system. The question is, can humans, generation after generation, deal with that kind of isolation? And also, can we use a hollowed out asteroid to create artificial gravity by spinning it? Possibly. There have been ways proposed. We would have to strengthen the asteroid with a framework. And by the way, I'm going to be talking about an asteroid ship in my video today, an alien asteroid ship. And some of you guys may know exactly what I'm talking about there. But nevertheless, yeah, that would be an interesting project, at least in terms of the long-term survival of the species. An asteroid ship is doable as long as you can get the artificial gravity part taken care of. Otherwise, you may find yourself unable to live any place aside from maybe very low gravity worlds where you end up where daily exercise might contribute to your ability to survive on a low asteroid planet. It really all depends. The use of Jupiter would be for deuterium engines. Very good point. I didn't think of that. Taking hydrogen from Jupiter's atmosphere to make deuterium fusion pellets. Once we crack fusion, which is only 10 years away, right? Or 20 years or 30 years, how long have we been saying that? But once we crack fusion, that's going to change a lot of things. Project Daedalus, which a lot of you I'm sure are familiar with, is a ship that can travel up to 20% of the speed of light using deuterium pellets. A ship that could get to Alpha Centauri in the space of a human lifetime, substantially less than a human lifetime. Assuming, of course, that Proxima Centauri or Alpha Centauri has a habitable world around it, or that we find one that's close by. But yes, thank you for bringing that up. Deuterium engines, once we have fusion mastered, then yeah, that's a great place to do it, just because Jupiter's such a great source of it. Although we would have to harvest the deuterium with robots, because or rather Jupiter generates such a massive amount of radiation. So that's something that we would also have to keep in mind. Using arrays of Dyson dot telescopes, where might we put them with the goal of a direct view of non-solar planets on the opposite side of the moon? Lagrange point 2, where Lagrange point 2, the opposite of Lagrange point 1, on the other side of the moon, which is a solar system parking lot, so to speak. That's the best place to put it. And we put radio telescopes especially there. And we are going to learn so much in one day that we haven't been able to learn here, because of the massive amounts of radio interference that we get from our own technology. As a matter of fact, on the very first day, we might pick up a signal from an extraterrestrial civilization. There are very strong arguments to be made that we've already picked up those signals a number of times. And I'm going to bring that up in my video tonight. Pretty compelling evidence. And this is something beyond the wow signal, for those of you familiar with that. We've picked up stuff besides the wow signal. And I'm not just pulling this out of UFO books. This is actually the truth. So in any event, something to consider. But yeah, a radio telescope, or any telescope of any kind, but especially a radio telescope on Lagrange point 2 on the opposite side of the moon, is unquestionably a huge thing that would change everything when it comes to radio astronomy, just because of all of the interference that our planet generates. It would make all the difference in the world. Okay, imagine the space roller coasters we could have. Yeah, that's true. On Mars, space roller coasters would be something else. Or on the moon for that matter. So yeah, that would be definitely a tourist attraction. Generation ships, prehistory, ancient man lived for years underground. It seems plausible. Well, maybe they did. That's kind of up for debate as well, as to how much we did and how much the Neanderthals did, and whether or not we used caves more for ceremonial spots than we use them for habitation, although there is evidence of habitation in caves. I don't know whether or not we lived underground for long stretches of time there. That's an point of archaeological debate. But nevertheless, yeah, there is evidence to suggest that we did. So yeah. Yes, you're right, FTL. I'm not going to repeat that, what you just said, because I want people to tune in tonight. But nevertheless, and you put in a link in regards to that. But yes, I agree. In my opinion, that was our first detection of an interstellar craft of some kind. There are too many things about it that were artificial in nature, and it's just our stubbornness and our narrow-mindedness and the scientific community's lack of, or the amount that they value their reputation with their peers, that have prevented them from making this statement. They won't dare, because of the criticism that they received, because the few scientists that did say that it was extraterrestrial, or at least suggested the possibility, were hammered online. As a matter of fact, they were personally insulted online by their peers. So, it's ridiculous, it's absurd, and it's unscientific. So in any event, I don't know. It's something that makes me mad, but it's off topic, what I'm talking about later on tonight. So in any event, Barnard Star as a destination, yes, that would be another very possible destination. It really depends on how much we learn, and we're going to learn a lot more about exoplanets very soon, when we finally get these stupid telescopes into orbit. We're going to learn a lot more about these exoplanets, and whether or not they're capable of supporting human life. Once we determine that they can, then yeah, I think we need to seriously start looking at this kind of stuff. Daedalus, should pick a habitable planet and go for it. At least in my opinion. I don't know if I'd be the first to be on that ship, but nevertheless, it would be quite something else. Okay, what would you consider? Would you consider building a map of realistic industrialization of near space? Earth, Luna, local Lagrange, maybe Mars, Venus. These maps I've actually posted them on a couple. My China video showed a map of the industrialization of space. It actually, the reason I put it into that one is because there was a statement made by a member of a military think tank who pointed out that China was way ahead of the United States in the development of all of this. I'm not sure if he's right about that, but nevertheless, and also there is a map of that on that video. But I would be more than happy to post that because, in my opinion, is better than anything that I could make. What do you think will be the first in the solar system in terms of a megastructure? Boy, that's a tough one. I would say probably either a lunar space elevator or a lunar mass driver, one of the two, because both of them make it a lot easier, a lot more practical for us to exploit the resources on the moon. Even though I think a Martian space elevator also makes a heck of a lot of sense and allows us to travel to that planet a lot easier and get people to the surface a lot easier. There are more difficulties involved with that, of course. So in any event, I would say either lunar space elevator or a lunar mass driver. That's my opinion. Yeah, you're right, FTL. We are partially Neanderthal. You're right. We do have Neanderthal DNA in us, although that's only been recently determined. Yes, I'm FTL once again. I've got to stay off that topic because I just don't want the spoilers for my video. But thank you for bringing it up once again. This was the whole alien thing. According to the Hopi, the third age of man was spent underground. Well, the Hopi are an interesting tribe who know a heck of a lot and are incredibly advanced. So in any event, yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. Every PDF pinned is peer reviewed, says another space nut. Thank you for that. Thank you. Peer reviewed documentation is always something that I look at, by the way. I seldom look at stuff that isn't peer reviewed, although some, like the whole Venus thing, the opposition route to Mars, that one has not yet been peer reviewed, although there were dozens of astrophysicists who signed off on it, but still not peer reviewed yet. What is the most likely or ideal destination for any interstellar spacecraft, says to Space Boy? Well, I would say once we, again, as I said before, once we get our space telescopes up, wherever we find a habitable world. And I think that as our technology becomes more advanced and we get more details on these worlds, we're going to be able to pick up, whether or not these places are habitable. Also, however, we may pick up techno-signatures from these planets too. If we pick up techno-signatures, then it could be very dangerous to go to these places if these civilizations turn out to be unfriendly, as we might be to some extraterrestrial civilization that shows up on our doorstep. So we might want to be very careful about that. Send out a lot of signals, determine their intelligence or their intents, or maybe find out as much as we can about them before we start tossing signals their way, because if they are hostile, they might come our way. There are ways to be quiet. Oh, Alien Zookeeper. Well, thank you for arriving to the Discord. I will be keeping you in mind. Thank you for making it in time. I will keep this going for an extra 5 minutes for your benefit. So in any event, do you think any industrialized purpose for Venus deployment, specifically not scientific? That's a good question because we don't know a lot about what is on Venus. We do know that it has a lot of raw materials that are similar to ours, but that atmosphere and that heat and the destructive nature of it to our to our spacecraft and our machinery, it'd be tough to exploit that planet. Very, very tough. So I would say its best use is a flyby, gravitational slingshot on the way to Mars. I would say that's probably its best purpose, and that's not industrialized. That's just for transportation, but it might help industry, I suppose. But yeah, I think that scientific really is what Venus can tell us right now. It's just way too hostile. Way too hostile. Alien zookeeper Phobos tethered to the upper atmosphere of Mars. Yes, indeed, that's been brought up, and I totally agree. I think that that's a great idea. Contacting aliens, praise God, pass the ammunition. Lasers, nukes, mass drivers may actually be useful for our survival. I don't know. A civilization that's been around for millions of years, they might, for all we know, they might have a Dyson weapon. And if they do, we're dead meat. A Dyson weapon would blast our planet out of existence before we even knew it was coming. So we just better hope that their technology is somewhere in the vicinity of ours. Otherwise, they will pound us. And it's highly unlikely that we're going to run into an extraterrestrial civilization with a similar technology. Chances are there's going to be massive differences in technological development between civilizations, and any war would be no contest. And I would say most probably, like Independence Day, yeah, we took them down with a Apple Power book that proved to be a piece of junk. That was about the most ridiculous thing I ever saw on a science fiction movie. But in any event, the realistic result of that attack was we die. Something that was capable, an alien species capable of all that, just would have killed us all. And they wouldn't have had to use all those weapons either. They could have just used diseases or smashed an asteroid into us or something like that. I think there will be a large truck stop halfway point between the Earth and Moon and halfway between Earth and Mars. There's a lot of practical purposes for that in terms of propellant refill. Even if we stop using chemical rockets, refueling nuclear rockets, that sort of thing. Yeah, I would say that that there's a lot of practicalities, and Elon has talked about that. He's actually talked about that in terms of chemical rockets, in terms of making the Starship to where it can travel beyond Mars. So yeah, I would say that even if we start using nuclear rockets, we should definitely do that. Nuclear thermal rockets, etc., any kind of propellant. These truck stops or space stops or whatever. Anybody see Space Truckers, by the way? I loved that movie. That was just hilarious. Okay, a lot of useful gases and volatiles in the atmosphere, says Karith. I take it you're talking about Venus. Maybe so. Maybe that's an industrialization that I didn't think of. Yeah, possible, and in the upper atmosphere especially. But although, you know what, if we discover life in the atmosphere of Venus, and once again, this isn't my video tonight, there's going to be a heck of a lot of stuff on potential life that we've discovered. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that there's life there, and there's going to be a lot of money in that. Studying extraterrestrial life, no matter what it is, there's going to be huge money in that. The gain from exploiting besides gravity, it's just, yeah, Karith just brought that up in terms of useful gases and volatiles in the atmosphere. And then, as I said, I mentioned life. I think that there's just a lot of money in life. You discover a new evolutionary process, and you discover all kinds of things about maybe curing diseases, dealing with viruses, all kinds of stuff that we don't currently understand. Okay, floating cities. Yes, floating cities on Venus, yeah, very, very doable thing from colonization. As I mentioned before, we don't have the experience technology-wise with doing that versus the decades of experience that we have in keeping people alive in vacuum or in very with atmospheres that don't have any oxygen, such as Mars. So I still think Mars is a more feasible thing for colonization, safer, but nevertheless, Venus has a lot of advantages. For example, you wouldn't die immediately if your spacesuit ripped or very quickly because the pressures would be right. So there's a lot of advantages. Okay, physics is physics, says FTL. Yeah, and those very same physics would allow an advanced alien species to put an asteroid straight into our world if they wanted to, and wipe us out. I don't know. I don't think we'd stand much of a chance. I think a hostile alien species, I think our best bet is to be undetected. Don't let them find us if their intention is to attack us. Although, honestly, there's not a lot for them to gain from attacking us. Resources, it's everywhere. Everything we have, they have everywhere else in the solar system, and they don't have to fight us. Their only reason to attack us would be just for the ugly fun of it, or that they're paranoid, or that they want a population of slaves or something like that. That would be one of the few reasons that I could think of. Okay, first open contact will be with space missionaries. Yeah, where we try to convert them, they try to convert us. Okay, space train booster launchers could be simple large cable connected by slings. Oh, basalt fiber. FTL, you can't stop talking about it. Yeah, well, that sort of thing has been proposed. I don't know about with basalt fiber, but yeah, it has been proposed. And of course, the beginning part of that is kind of a space train between here and the moon. And by here, I mean geosynchronous orbit. Stripping down Mercury of all its natural product resources to build like a Dyson sphere or a Scott thruster. Yep, that's been discussed. However, it's been said that even stripping down all of Mercury wouldn't be enough for a Dyson sphere, but it might be enough for a Dyson swarm, although such a thing would take an insane amount of time and technology. That's a Kardashev level 2 civilization, and currently we're not even Kardashev level 1. I think we need to be Kardashev level 1 before we go to Kardashev level 2. But in any event, and by the way, there's evidence of Kardashev level 2 civilizations in the galaxy. Disputed, but it's there. And I'll be talking about that too. Okay. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfuric acid for hydrogen, etc. Well, yeah. So yeah, Dennis E. Taylor was an author that was just recommended by Corey. Thank you. I'll definitely have a look at it. We don't even make very good slaves. Robots could do it better, says the Space Boy. Yeah, possibly, depending on how easy robots are to build. We're already building them pretty well. But then again, and a friend of mine used to be what was called the Japanese industrial coordinator at his factory. And one of the big advantages that the Japanese talk about is that humans are self-repairing. And they don't break down in the same way that machines do. And it was expressed in that cold of a way. And he implemented that at his factory, by the way, the Japanese industrial method of production. And it really made a big difference. So I don't know. We may actually make pretty good slaves, at least the right ones, especially if they're holding our families hostage, that sort of thing. Kind of a scary thought. Let's hope aliens are nothing like that. But in any event, kind of makes you wonder whether or not we should be actively signaling all the time. Okay, Johnny Spacer, I'm beginning to side more with the rare Earth hypotheses in regards to intelligent life in the galaxy and the universe. Well, a lot of people are with you, Johnny Spacer, and there's a lot of things that makes our Earth extremely unique. But then there's evidence to indicate that there are places that are actually more conducive to life than our Earth. For example, red dwarfs that have calmed down. They live for trillions of years, as opposed to ours that only lives for billions. So the potential of extremely advanced forms of civilizations developing around those stars are actually pretty high. So I don't know. It's hard to say. It's a hotly debated topic, to say the least. I tend to go the other way. I tend to think that there is a fair amount of extraterrestrial presence in the galaxy, and we just haven't admitted it. Not saying that we're hiding it. I'm just saying that we haven't admitted it, and that our standards are too high. But in any event, we shall see. Okay, aliens are not the winning topic today. You're right. I need to stop talking about it. Sorry, I apologize. Geez, we're almost 5 minutes over. I'll give you a couple more minutes. Okay, continuing, considering the streams are, it might make sense to have a main topic is always the main topic. Yeah, probably so. Probably so. We have talked a lot about aliens in this. Sorry. It's a topic I just love, and I'm going to be talking about it later today. So I'll shut up about it. Okay. I heard that planets around red dwarfs are tidally locked. Yes. However, we have created mathematical models of these planets to indicate how they could still be habitable even though they're tidally locked. They're not as massive of regions that are habitable, but we've created climate models that show that tidally locked worlds can be, it can develop life and be inhabitable. Now, does that mean habitable? Does that mean that they're awesome places? No, but at the same time, with trillions of years to develop, who knows? Okay, we're talking about aliens again. We got to stop it. We got to stop it. Okay, 3 more people typing, and then this is it. I'm sorry, guys. I've gone way over. I've gone way over. Okay. All right. I need to skip that one. It's about aliens. Need to skip it. 2 more. Yes, you're right. New York Times talking about UFOs. Stop the alien thing. Okay. The Space Boy just wanted to say, have a good day and goodbye. There is another question. Any thoughts on using the sun? This is the last one. And an elliptical orbit to build a factory that uses the heat energy to make stuff and drop it off in Earth local. Well, I think that's a great idea. I think that's a fantastic idea. And we should be exploiting Earth industry into space. It's far less damaging to this planet that is so valuable and so rare. And yet we're not doing it. We're not even close. And are we even going to be able to do it before it's too late? That's a big question. But in any event, that is the extent of it. Guys, I'm afraid that I know there's more topics or more typing coming in. I am so sorry, but I've gone actually almost 7 minutes. Orbit solar furnaces to smelt metals. Okay, all right. So in any event, thanks for joining me. I'd like to try to keep these to 90 minutes. So in any event, we've gone over the 90, but I do it every Sunday at differing times, depending on whether or not I'm trying to include people in Australia and things like that, because I don't want to cut them out. I have supporters on the other side of the globe, and I hate them to be cut out. But at the same time, people in the US and in the Americas in general, and in Europe benefit from this time frame. So I may be doing this a lot more. I'm not sure, because we do have quite the audience today. But in any event, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to our Patreon members and supporters for making all of this possible. And next video coming out today, unless something weird happens, but should have it out today. So until next time, everybody, stay angry. about space.